Our guest list is a who's who of Kansas difference makers and power players. This week, we welcome a native Wichitan who has devoted his life to justice and equality. He first made a name for himself more than 60 years ago when he helped make history by taking a stand in downtown Wichita. Galyn Vesey was among the group of young African Americans who in 1958 participated in the Dockum sit-in. They refused to accept the policy that prohibited blacks from being served at the Dockum drugstore's lunch counter. Vesey and the others occupied seats while the staff refused to take their orders. The sit-in lasted 3 weeks. Finally, the owner relented and told his staff to serve the black students because the sit-in was costing him money. It was a major moment in ending such racist policies at businesses in Wichita and across the nation. 3 years later, Galyn Vesey earned his psychology degree from Wichita State. He went on to earn a master's from the University of Oklahoma in social work and a PhD from Syracuse University. That led to a long career in teaching in the fields of social work and public policy at universities in New York, Alabama, and Kansas. Now, Dr. Vesey is retired and reflecting upon his place in history. Coming up, we'll discuss the strides made in racial equality and the work still left to be done. We'll also talk about what's driven Dr. Vesey to be a leader in the field of social justice, humanity, and service to community. And we'll consider where the movement goes from here in this time of raucous political polarization. This promises to be an enlightening half hour as I go one-on-one with Dr. Galyn Vesey. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'm honored to welcome Dr. Galyn Vesey to the program. Dr. Vesey, I've been wanting to have you on. It's taken a while. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, more than some 60 years later, that is, after the Dockum sit-in, how vividly do you remember the Dockum sit-in as an event?
Well, in my case, it's been easier for me to keep it in my immediate mindset because I'm writing a book that I intend to include a segment on the Dockum sit-in in one of the chapters. So I've continued to gather information and talk to some of the participants and to get them to jot some things down.
So was it just like yesterday, or how vividly is this in your mind?
And that's a good question, but it would depend on the particular aspect. Some things will be livelier than others, some others still a little murky perhaps, and have to be careful how I use that.
Let's back up to your childhood. Tell us about your growing up days and what developed that drive, because your parents did not encourage you to do that. You
Right.
did that on your own. So
Yes.
talk about how you were raised and how you got involved.
Wow. I was born at 1045 Matheson Street in 1945. Was the oldest sibling of a family of about 4 or 5 after I was 9 or 10 years old anyway. So I spent a lot of time with cousins, and if there were youngsters in the neighborhood on Matheson. That whole area was going to be an important part of my growth. I didn't realize it at the time. There was a policeman who would come by sometime when I was a child and give me a ride around the block. It was only a block and a half from Dunbar Elementary School, and I was going to spend a lot of time there. There was a shopping area on Cleveland between 9th and 10th Street. So movie theaters, drugstores, doctor's offices. So it was sort of a place to be. A lot was going on. And
you were free to go to any of these places?
Yes.
Except the Dockum drugstore?
Yes, that was going to be a different era in another part of town.
So what kind of racial inequalities did you experience in those days that would cause you to have developed the drive to be a participant during the sit-in?
You know, this is and we don't have a lot of time, I know, but this is sort of a mixed story. And I'll try to be real brief here. At one time, black youth, black children, would have gone to white schools, but it would not have been in large groups. And as long as it was a small number, that seemed to work out. As the number of blacks increased, almost overnight, the Black Board of Education, the Board of Education raised $40,000 and built 4 black schools. Tucson Louverture on 13th and Mosley, on 15th and Wabash now, I think. Frederick Douglass. There were 2 other schools that were part of like a trailer, not brick built. One was south of town, Grand Elementary, and then the 18th Street was up near one of the rivers, and my mother attended that one. The whole presentation and delivery of education was different for blacks, as we were part of a all-black school system.
So that led then, I'm assuming, to opening your eyes and seeing there was inequality of some sorts going on in the community.
Right.
And that led to the Dockum sit-in when you got older.
Yes.
So
yes.
How did that sit-in all begin?
Well, we'll have to start with the NAACP, the national chapter, and one of their roles would be to visit local chapters to see what kind of things they were doing to make life better for black families and black individuals and black communities. And at one point, the idea of a sit-in was, I'm sure, mentored and nurtured, because that was one of the unkind and regular features of the Wichita community. What am I saying? Black people, for instance, could shop in stores like Woolworth and Bucks and the Dockums to buy products to take out. Mm-hmm. You could even get food and things like that if you went behind went to, say, the end of the counter to get food to go. And that suited well some of the white employees, because they might come down the elevator, get something to go back upstairs. But we learned early that you'd be noticed after sitting at the counter for a period of time. And I guess the thought was, if we ignore them, they'll finally get the message and get up and leave. Well, of course, once it became a project, our intent was to stay there as long as we had to get served. Mm-hmm. And they'd politely say, we don't serve blacks here at this establishment. Now you can get something to carry out.
Right. So then what led to that sit-in?
We were encouraged by the national chapter to maybe use this as an activity for the black chapter, the Untitled Chapter of
Is that the NAACP?
Yes.
Okay.
And we had an officer, 2 officers really, President Ronald Walters, who's deceased now, and Carol Parks Hahn, who is still part of this community. And I don't know, probably anywhere from 20 to 15 students who were participants in the NAACP youth chapter. I hesitate on that because sometimes they might not have come to meetings, or they might not have all been downtown at the Dockum sit-ins once we decided that would be a good activity for us to challenge the establishment and the historical precedents for not allowing blacks to sit at the counter and eat their food or drink their coffee the way they did any other patron.
So was the sit-in a huge news story in those days, or was it quiet?
That's a good question. Originally, no. And a good example of that would be, there were 2 dates, Thursday evenings, because the city was open, the buildings, the stores open up very late on Thursday evenings, and obviously on Saturdays, a lot of shopping went on. My parents didn't know that I was participating on Saturday mornings at the Dockum sit-in. And the purpose for that, my reasoning for that was the kind of work my dad did. He lugged beef at a packing company. Might have cost him his job. Say, for instance, the owner where he worked played golf with the owner of the Dockum drugstores. And that's one of the complexities. There were some other youth whose parents knew very well where they were on Saturday mornings because they were active members of the NAACP. Mm-hmm. And there were other complexities like that, it wasn't all a simplistic situation.
So during those days, Dr. Vesey, those 3 weeks, how much support did you all receive from others around you, from the community, any at all?
Well, again, very little, because it wasn't a well-known story except for those who knew about the activity of the NAACP.
Okay.
And of course, as I said before, it was years later. As a matter of fact, my dad had passed on. He may never have known that I was an active member of this. Mom did, because there was a celebration banquets years later where they did recognize, this community did recognize the youth who were involved and who we are still here or could come back, and so we would have a good showing.
So when the owner of that restaurant said, "Go ahead and serve them," that ended the whole thing, right?
Yeah, almost as quietly as it began. About that quietly, it was over.
So the question is, what do you remember about the day it ended, and how did you feel? How did the group feel?
There's another member, and this would probably be true with a number of us. I always like to prepare audiences to say, probably today there's no 2 of us who would remember everything that happened, transpired, or experienced it. And so the story that's told about that moment, the part that I remember that is a little different. I remember on one Saturday morning, there was a tall gentleman who obviously was a administrator of some sort with Dockum, on the board or a manager or something. Had a long coat on, had a felt hat, and he had been conversing with his staff. There was a petition where they would keep food and dishes and stuff, and he was back talking with, I guess, the manager. And on his way out, that particular day, we had made some placards and billboards that we had stuck up on have them set on the counter right in front of us. Because when we would sit in, after a while, whites would either stop coming in, or some of them would go ahead and eat their food like they didn't know what was going on. But as he walked by, had finished his business there, he made a comment as he walked by me, and take those posters down. Well, right away we set them down. I can't even remember what the poster said. Probably something that Dockum won't serve everybody or something like that. He did make some comments just as he went out the door. I'm not exactly sure Carol Hahn makes the point, and she's the one that coined that phrase, says that he said something to the effect, serve them, I'm losing too much money, or something like that. Now what I remember is I got up from my seat, went back behind that petition after he'd gone, and I approached the manager and I said, you know, we probably had told them this before, we really didn't come in here to cause trouble. We come in here to receive service just like anybody else.
So that day it ended. What then was the immediate impact, if any, did it have on Wichita?
Immediately, I would say very little, because it was still not well known. To this day, there are both blacks and whites, adults, who will come up to me when I give presentations and will say, I knew nothing about this. And I can believe it. You know, it's hard to believe.
Why is that?
I don't know entirely, except that at that time, I'm sure there would have been mixed feelings about, don't you all have something else to do except go down there and start trouble? You see what I'm saying? Whereas another group might say, right on, this is important. Glad that you young people are doing that.
So were there things that you expected to change in Wichita that did not change?
Well, I'm not sure how much we expected things to. If you're a student of history, change comes very slow sometimes. Fact is, it even takes steps backwards. So I'm not so sure about that. But I think the important point is that there were things happening in other places, like what happened to Emmett Till in Mississippi, what happened to the Little Rock Nine in Arkansas. All of these things together, I believe, appear to be essential or necessary in progress that is lasting. And even then, it's going to be challenged. Right today, there's talk about canceling some of the laws and progress that we've made.
So, in your opinion, Doctor, what concrete laws or policies could bring about racial equality in America?
Well, to start with, if there's a public and a community acceptance, it still has to be, some of the stuff will still have to be, part of the laws, like that, and dealt with by city governments and state governments, and perhaps even the Supreme Court at some point in time. But it makes it easier if there is a groundswell of all communities, black, white, Hispanics, Asians, what have you. It makes for a more wholesome community as well, too.
Was the Dockum sit-in the most defining moment of your life?
If not, certainly at the top, yeah. But you didn't know that at the time, you know. There's been a groundswell since then, and the interest now from all parts of the community. I just spoke at Wichita State University this week, and we had over 100 people there. And you're still hearing from both blacks and whites, what was that all about? Didn't know anything about it.
So were your parents highly educated?
No.
No?
No.
How did you develop that drive? You went to Wichita State, you had your master's in Oklahoma, and a PhD from Syracuse University in New York.
Yeah. Community was really community in those days, though. My parents knew black teachers. I was taught by black teachers, and eventually by white teachers and Hispanic teachers as well. After something like that is introduced on the public scene, then there is more likelihood that it will continue to be groomed and shaped and become perhaps a normal part of the fabric of the society. But again, not overnight for sure. It was years before there were black teachers who taught in white schools. Early on, white teachers taught black children. But the opposite of that didn't just fall out of the sky overnight.
Dr. Vesey, what has that Dockum experience done to or for your life and the life of your family?
Well, for one thing, it certainly brought to life a saying that you hear from adults all the time. You know, if you want to accomplish something, you have to work at it. It won't happen overnight. And it was almost like a light turns on and you begin to see the importance of that. And not only that, you begin to see the importance of sharing that with other groups, individuals as well, regardless of the type of field you were in. You know, you pass it on, otherwise it does no good.
So as a result of all of the experiences that you've had, education, the Dockum, the discrimination, the successes you've had in life, what now is your life's philosophy?
I think just that I didn't get where I am by myself, could not have made it if it was just myself. From family to the churches, to the organizations in the community, to people you know and don't know. And it, you know, you can stick your chest out with pride when you're doing something positive and passing it on to others, just like it was done with me.
So is it do positive things and pass them on to others?
Absolutely.
What would you like your legacy to be?
That anybody and all of us has something to offer. I think the scriptures would bear that out throughout the Bible, and that it doesn't have to be difficult. You can only do so much, but do that and do it well, and then share it with others.
What's next for Dr. Vesey, Galyn Vesey? I know you're writing a book.
I was just going to say, hopefully finishing that book.
When can we expect it?
Good news by the end of this year. I'm not saying that it'll be finished, but I hope to be a lot farther down the track by 1st of January next year.
Do you have a title for it already?
Yes, I do, but I can't share it right now. So.
Why not?
That's a story I'm keeping for a time being.
Okay,
so
okay.
It'll deal with the Black experience in 5 chapters, though, so that'll give you some idea. Education is the most crucial. It's not the most important. To me, the 2nd chapter, social cultural activities, is the most important, because that's where your social organizations, the strengths in the community to help families rear children in positive ways, business and economic development. There was a time when white businesses may not have been so favorable for blacks. It's a good thing we had our own doctors, drugstores, movie theater, political activity, and then finally the last chapter would be religious institutions and spiritual foundations.
So quickly compare the days of Dockum to today in Wichita. What's your comparison, your description of today?
Yeah, we've taken a step backwards.
You think?
Yeah, there still is interest by adults with other folks' children. One of my favorite sayings is that black folks and white folks as well spent quality time with other folks' children. Parents, there were positive aids in the community to help shape and groom children and what was expected of them.
So you're saying that in reference to race relations, we have not taken a step backwards, but in social interactions?
We've taken a step forward with race relations, okay, but still there are too many whites and blacks, Asians, what have you, falling through the gaps, who need more nurturing, more development, more support. And
whose responsibility should that be?
well, the entire community at all levels, local levels, county, state level, and the federal government. There has to be insight that we're still missing something. Those who come from wealth, those who have education, those who have all kinds of resources, they're going to make it. But there's some others who will fall in the gaps, who will fall on the wayside if they aren't carefully nurtured and groomed and given some extra support. At that point, there's nothing that can stop them. It's like, instead of a negative contagion, we're talking about a positive contagion.
Right.
It catches on.
And my final question is, who is Dr. Galyn Vesey today?
I hope just a child of God and a member of the community who understood that love and appreciation for others is more important than just me, myself. It's about others, the same way Jesus did.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galyn Vesey,
Thank you for
joining
having me.
us. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm so glad you took the time to watch. oneonone@kpts.org is our email address. That's if you have a question or comment. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'll see you again soon.